Well, everybody knows the Zimbabwean voice now, that's for sure. And it's a beautiful voice, that one. One of unity, one of togetherness, one of peace, one of love, you know. That's the way forward. Oga, Oga.
What I just want to do is just like, maybe I'll give you a little bit of context. So of course you said you saw all this stuff online, but the basic theme, I'm sure as you've seen, is kind of how, especially when I was living in South Africa or in the UK, you only really see one thing coming out of Zim for the most part, or at least in terms of the stories that come out of it, and it's very loaded towards politics and bad economy. So I just wanted to like speak to people that are shifting it slightly, and just not that those things aren't happening, but just shedding light on the good things that are happening in Zim in terms of whether it's travel or small business or philanthropy. And I thought would have you on the podcast to chat about what you're doing and how it's going.
No, for sure. I mean, obviously, my mum's from Zim,
Right.
but ever since I was a kid, anytime someone would be like, "Where are you from?" I'd be like, "I'm Zimbabwean," and my mum would be like, "You're not, like you're half," and I'm like, "No, no, no, I'm Zimbabwean." So it's always
Right.
been a bit of a difficult experience for me, like embracing being from Zim, because some people don't see me as one, and some, do. So
Mm,
it's always really like uncomfortable for me. So to be able to, be on a
mm,
platform like this and it's not speaking about what I usually do, like, in terms of the
right.
other platforms I'm on where they focus on hair or whatever.
Right.
It's really refreshing because I love owning my Zimbabwean side,
Mm,
and I own it a bit too much sometimes, that I neglect that I also am half British.
right.
Um, so thank you for allowing me to be on this platform. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. And on that point, I want to just keep rolling as we're rolling,
Yeah.
because I think you hit on something very poignant. You spoke about how when you grew up, you owned that. Like, no, I'm from Zim.
Mm,
I think one of the big things I wanted to speak to you about was because the nature of being Zimbabwean, quote unquote, has changed in the sense that, I mean, I'm speaking to you here from Washington, D.C. You're, half British, half Zimbabwean. And, I might have kids in Zimbabwe or here, and they might be half American, half,
mm.
Zimbabwean. And I think for me, and that's okay. The big thing for me that I was trying to like have this conversation because to say it's okay to embrace both. I feel as though sometimes, at least being from Zim, not everyone wants to embrace the Zimbabwean side of themselves fully.
Mm.
But it's okay to be fully both. So for you, growing up, when you were being raised, was your mom very like adamant on teaching you part of your culture and speaking to
Yeah, well, do not
you know?
tell us, Shona. So, I
Mm,
think that in itself, if you're not from Zimbabwe, then I basically just said I speak Shona. But
right.
um, that in itself, is huge. Like, even I just came back from Zim last month, so
Mm.
even being there, and we're being stopped by the police, and the police are like, "Uyu, dofungane mari," and I'm sitting in the passenger seat, like, I can hear
I
you.
can hear
Like,
exactly
I
what
know
you're
what you're
saying.
saying. Yeah, like there were so many moments when
Right.
I went to a party when I first got there with my uncle and my auntie, but it was my auntie's side, so obviously not really my
Right.
family. Like, she's
Right.
just joined us. So, I turn up there and there's all these little kids and they're all shouting, "Pane Murungu Panapa," and I'm looking behind me and I'm like, where? Like, looking for my dad, like looking for someone who's
You're like,
white.
because I do not see it. Right. 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 Right.
Yeah, so, I'm like, who? And
Mm.
they're speaking in Shona, but these are
Mm.
kids, they're like 8, 9,
The kids,
and
yeah.
then they're
Mm.
speaking Shona, but obviously, we greet. And so I was like, Makadi Gogo.
Yeah.
And
Right. They're not like,
Sh-
wait, what?
Shona,
What? Right.
yeah.
Right.
And then one of the kids turned to their mom and they were like, "This is very suspicious. Why does she speak Shona?" And I was like, "I'm
Like it's
Zimbabwean." And they were
right.
like, "No, you're not." And I didn't
Wow.
like when I was in Zim that I had to prove that I was
Right.
Zimbabwean.
Right.
Like even in safari lodges, if I would speak Shona, I remember the guy being like, "Nah, you're not Zimbabwean," and I'm like, "I'm literally having a full-blown conversation with you in
Right.
Shona." Like,
Right. Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
not a language that I can go to
Right.
China or
Right.
Singapore and
Right.
learn out of
Right.
entertainment. Like
Right.
it's a language that you probably are Zimbabwean if you're speaking
Mm.
it. So
Mm.
I think that was the only thing that was really disheartening. But back to your question, um, I very much grew up in a home where for dinner we're having sadza, but my friends in school are all white, so they're having chicken nuggets and chips or
Mm.
pasta or lasagna. And when I'd go to their homes and see the difference, I would be like, wow, like, I'm very different. Like I
Right.
would
Right.
recognize the difference.
Right.
Or my home was decorated with imbiras and drums and
Right.
all these different things. So everything about my upbringing was very different, but I learned to love it because I'd always seen that from the beginning.
Mm.
And my mom just always made me like see the beauty in Zim. Like I never saw it for its politics, I guess because I was too young to.
Right.
But only as I've gotten older, when I've driven through town and I'm so disheartened because the pictures I saw of it in Rhodesian
At the
days,
same one.
it's
Right.
the
The
same but
same.
worse.
Right.
It's like the same
Yeah.
building, but it's dilapidated. The
Right.
same paint that was done in the 60s, but it's worse now.
Mm-hmm.
And that breaks your heart because you're like, it still is beautiful, but it's like, why are we going downhill? Like,
Correct.
why was the education the best when my mom was a kid?
Mm.
It could be better than how it was for her
Correct.
now. So you just ask those questions, and then when you don't really get the answers,
Mm.
it just end up really sad.
Right. I think, firstly, thank you so much for sharing on that earlier part. I think with regards to the second point you spoke about, which is why is everything going backwards rather than forward? I think that's a really low, like, we can spend this whole podcast talking about that.
For
But
sure.
exactly, you know what I mean? But I think the big thing for me, I had an interview with a really great guy called Dalumuzi, and he was talking about how, yes, that is, and you have all of these questions, but now I think I just turned 30 like a month ago. And before, when I was young, I was the one asking questions and pointing fingers. Now it's like, you're 30. It's now you're in the seat now. You can't always,
Mm,
you know what I mean? So, which is like, and that was very illuminating to me to say, oh gosh. So, whatever way in which, whether I'm in home physically or away, at least the intent, this conversation and the podcast in general, or the ideas, it's your turn now,
mm,
and you find whatever ways it looks like to you, whether it's to shed light or to move whatever you think needs to be moved forward. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
As opposed to pointing fingers. But to the first point you mentioned, um, the whole notion around having to prove the nature of your Zimbabweanness. Um, I think also, like, I've often seen a lot of Zimbabweans. There's this thing where some people might not speak Shona fluently, but they say they grew up in Ireland or America, for
mm,
example, and they want to connect. And sometimes people police their Shona. They'll be like, "Oh, it's broken," or they'll switch to English. I think for me, one of the things I wanted to talk about was like that it's okay to allow the definition of what we deem to be Zimbabwean to evolve because it has to.
yeah.
Do you know what I'm
Mm.
saying? Um, have you found that still to be a challenge even in the UK, or is it only when you go back to Zim specifically?
Defo only when I go back to Zim. Like
Hmm.
when I'm in the UK, when I see a Zimbabwean, it's like I get so excited
Right.
because I love being able to speak Shona. Like
Mm,
it just makes me feel a sense of belonging
mm,
whenever I can, know there's a community that we share. We know what it's like when you first land at Harare Airport and
right.
it's like it's so small, but you're just so excited. And
Right.
when you first see Majanje
Yes.
in the road, and you're
Mm,
just like like
mm,
they know those little details that make home home. So I
mm,
get excited, but I definitely find it more in Zimbabwe. In the UK, I'd never really have to prove it because as soon as I say like Dinotara Shona, then it's
mm,
like, oh my God, like, and we have a whole conversation,
right.
and they want to find out where your mum's from or where you grew up or things
Right.
like that. So it becomes a whole like a lovely conversation that I always
Absolutely.
like.
Absolutely. And speaking of Zim, you mentioned that you were just there now. What were you
Yeah.
doing? What were you doing there? I mean, of course, it's your home, but what were you
Hmm.
up to? So maybe just share that and what that was like. That
Yeah,
trip was.
sure.
Mm,
Um, as you said just now, I
mm,
really liked it where you said, now I'm 30,
mm.
it's my turn. I mean, I'm not 30 yet, but I obviously have a platform and,
Right.
people
Right.
always with the platform, people always want you to do something with it. So for me, I feel like by showcasing the beauty of Zimbabwe,
Mm,
like that is doing something.
mm.
Just to invite others, people from the US were like, sis, you've sold me on Zimbabwe. Like I would have never thought to go there.
Wow.
I'm gonna go. Like
Wow.
I had a few messages like that, and I was like, wow, like the tourism board need to holler at
They
me.
need to put me on, like,
Yeah,
we need to do
I've just
something
promoted
because I'm moved.
Zimbabwe.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
literally.
right.
But when I was there, obviously, family time, like the first thing you do. I went to Kariba for the first time, which was
Mm,
amazing. Like
mm.
it's paradise. I also went to Vumba, which I loved.
My
Like that was
favorite.
my
My
favorite.
favorite, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Mm.
just like just the views, like you don't feel like I say this lightly, but you don't feel like you're in Zim when you're there.
He was like
Like
Scotland.
just because
He was like
the Zim
Scotland.
I know
Yeah.
is like
Mm,
Harare, that's all I had known is the city life. So going somewhere where it's just mountains and even in Kariba, where
mm.
you kind of get that beach feel.
Yeah.
At first, I had to check myself and be like, where am I? Because my Zimbabwe is Borrowdale or,
Right.
Newlands and places
Right.
like that. So it was so nice to see a different side of Zimbabwe that you never see,
Mm,
like that's
mm.
never highlighted to you. So I really, really enjoyed those trips. I also, of course, went to like a few safaris. I went to Umire, which was nice. I'd never been there before.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I had the best time. I was trying all the restaurants like in Sam Levy,
Right.
wherever I could go and get food, I
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
there. Because food in Zim is like amazing. It's so fresh, it's
Yeah.
so rich.
It's rich.
So
It's rich.
yeah, and I also my main intention to go there was to buy stuff for my home. So I went to a lot of markets and haggled my way through and bought some amazing pieces for my home. So that was also like a really fun experience for me as well.
That's terrific. And when you go, did you go alone or do you like bring friends and mates and stuff to say, look, I'm showing
Um,
this, but you
Yeah,
got,
the first trip I went on when I was like grown was with my one of my friends. She's from America. It was her first time in Africa. So then I also took two other friends. One was from the Netherlands, one was from LA to Zim as well. Then I
hmm
also another friend came with me on this trip she's from Haiti.
hmm
So I've always brought friends with me to just show them that my home is beautiful, and it's always been really nice to like see them, try chibage from the
right,
street or
right.
trying spada for the first time, and they're like, "So do I eat with my hands?" And I'm like, "Yes." Like that's always been,
Right.
really, really fun. But yeah, I just like love bringing people because it's such a beautiful place.
That's so huge. Um, Before I think I get ahead of myself. I think everyone's gonna be listening. Like, who is Nia? Like, what does she do? You know. So maybe I know. Maybe I'll let you introduce yourself since we got a little bit stuck into the Zoom
Yeah.
rabbit hole. But who are you? What do you do? And yeah, that's it.
So my name's Nia, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm half Zimbabwean, half British,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a Gemini. I always have to bring the star sign into it
Why?
because I feel
Why does the star sign always have to be
because then people would
right?
understand me, like
Right.
understand.
Right.
In Geminis, we have, a stereotype for
Like a
having two
dual
personalities.
personalities. Right.
Yeah, so
Right.
maybe they'll be like, this girl, she's a bit crazy, but then
Right.
she's also really calm. And I have my own salon for curly hair, and I am a content creator, and I'm also an author. So I do loads of different things, but
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorites is, of course, to travel and just experience the world. But COVID, of course, kind
Yeah.
of stopped that. So I had to find beauty in stillness and in being in London, which was quite hard because I love the tropical vibes.
Right. What did you get out of that? So of course you talked. Thank you so much for the introduction. What did you get out of the stillness? I think there was a look. If you're fortunate enough to still be able to, like myself, have a place, still have work to do, and be still and be relatively healthy. Um, it was a great time for it to be transformative at least because it was like I felt like I was almost robbed of my 20s. By 2 years, I'm like, damn, I feel like I've been robbed.
Mm,
But it gave me time to be still and think and listen to myself. And I'd never really listened, not never, but for a long time, I'd not been listening to myself. So what did you get out of that COVID
Um,
period?
I think I was always someone who was always like doing the most to make me feel good about myself.
Mm,
And I felt like by having this super busy schedule where I'm like back to back meetings and going to these events and traveling and not resting,
Right.
you know, when people glamorize
The
not resting.
like team no sleep grind.
Yeah,
Right.
that
Right.
was me. Like
Right.
I always loved when people would be like, "You're doing so much stuff, like, don't you get tired?" And I'd be like, "No." And in reality, I was like exhausted, but
Right.
I didn't even recognize that. So when, I had literally almost a year when you add it up, because we had 3 lockdowns, when I sat still, I realized I have lived an amazing life, and I haven't recognized that because I'm always looking for what's next.
Mm,
It forced me to, like look through photo albums and look at my travels and be like, wow, like
mm,
I've been to all over the world. Like I've opened a salon, I've done so
mm,
many amazing things, and it just made me acknowledge who I am, what I've done.
mm,
But it also made me see the beauty in the little things, like seeing beauty in just enjoying your home if you're fortunate to have one. Like
mm,
that's how my mindset changed. Or like enjoying your first breath in the day, taking joy in opening the window and letting fresh air in.
mm,
Like
mm.
those little things I learned to make a big deal out of, because life was the same on
Right.
loop every day. So
Right.
I had to like learn to make every day an adventure. And I learned to also like the power of being kind to yourself, where I would wake up every morning and make a delicious breakfast like I was in a restaurant, or I would get ready and do my makeup and put on a cute outfit like I was in Jamaica. Like I literally pampered myself
Meditating
so,
yourself. Right. Love it. Love
yeah,
it.
so that
Right.
I
Right.
felt good. Whereas I feel like if I had just been in my sweats the whole 6 months and just sat and watched TV and not like read books, or like vibe to music or
Mm,
painted or
mm.
done things like that, then I probably would have had a different experience for sure.
I feel that. Yeah. Just like heightening almost self-awareness. And I think the key thing is being kind to oneself. I think that's the
Mm,
most important things. Okay. Well, I'm glad you came out of it, in one piece and alive. But I think a lot of people, like I was looking doing my research, a lot of people look and they see all of that you've done and all the places you've traveled. And when we were growing up, or I don't know, when you were growing, what if one could even want to be? I don't even like the term influencer per se, but God, I don't want to box you in to like one
mm.
category. You know what I'm saying? But when you're growing up, to take it back, what did you want to be? Do you know what I
I
mean?
wanted,
Mm, mm,
I don't know if people will believe me, but I hope that I have my mum to prove. But when I was younger, I
mm.
wanted to get rid of poverty in Zimbabwe. And the
Really?
reason
That
that
was
was
like
my
your
goal.
thing, right?
Yeah, this was like my first goal, because
Right.
obviously I was going to Zim so much and I would see like little kids, like in the neighborhood, and they wouldn't have what I had, and I
Mm,
didn't understand why. So I
mm,
remember coming back from Zim at once and I went to my mum's room and I was like, "Mum, why is there like poor people in Zimbabwe?"
mm,
Like I
mm.
was, maybe 6 at the time, and she had to break down poverty and like,
Oof. Glad you
all
bumping like,
of
oh
that.
gosh, after
You're 6 year old,
you're right.
and I was like, but that's not fair.
Mm,
And I was like, I want to get rid of that. Like I want everyone to have everything. And she was like, you can do that when you're older. So that was my first dream. But afterwards, I wanted to be an air hostess. I wanted to be a fashion designer. I wanted to write in magazines. And
mm.
I've kind of been able to do those things, but
All
in different ways.
right.
Like writing a book or having features in magazines. Fashion, I've been able to work with brands.
Mm.
And then the air hostess, I've just been a passenger. So I've kind of been able to do them, but not exactly to how my childhood self imagined.
That's wild. And when I want to go back to the first point, which is like your first initial hunch or dream in terms of alleviating poverty. Have you still felt some sort of like pull towards
Yeah,
like, right, like plight and saying like, man, this is not, and not to say, look, for full disclosure, not to say poverty is the universal norm in Zimbabwe. We're not saying that,
mm,
but like a lot of countries, there's poverty.
yeah,
Do you still feel like a pull towards that to some degree?
defo. My goal, but I always in my head, I'm like logistics, politics. I don't know how I'm
Right,
gonna do it.
right.
But my goal is to open like kind of like an orphanage slash school, like where it's just this huge campus, and
Mm,
like kids from, wherever in Zim who don't have those opportunities can stay there and go to school. Like I would love to do that, but in my head I'm like, I don't know how. But when I go to Zim, I obviously speak to people like,
right,
staff in restaurants or in hotels, and when you hear their story, I study journalism, so I'm very able to get a
right,
story out of someone. Like
right.
it's one of my unique traits. So when I would hear people's story where during COVID they were getting fish from, the river in Kariba for $1 a day, and they still had a smile on their face because that's all they had to,
Right.
it breaks your heart because you're like, why is the world designed in a way that some people have more, some have
Mm-hmm.
less,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
you just question things and you end up down a
Just
deep
deep
down
diving, like
spiral.
right, 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 right.
Yeah. So I always feel that pull for sure, but I know that right now I'm not able to do those things. The thing closest to that was I built toilets for a school in Kenya, which obviously
Right.
isn't Zim, but I went to visit a school
Mm-hmm.
and I saw the conditions the kids were learning in. Their toilet was literally a hole in the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, this is not right. So I
Mm-hmm.
raised money through social media, and that was like one of the highlights of my career so far.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing the kids send me pictures of them holding a thank you Nia next to a toilet. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, grateful for a toilet. Like,
Mm-hmm.
imagine what else we could do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely want to do something like that for Zim, but I just need to figure out
The
how.
logistics.
Need to also be patient with myself. I'm still young, so as much as that dream is a big one, it's gonna take time. It's not gonna happen
Right.
overnight.
Right. But someone might be listening and might DM you an actual, real logistics and how that can be implemented. I think
Yeah.
whenever I don't know this, I don't know what turning 30 makes you feel like, but you end up being like, geez, you start thinking of time very differently. Like, geez, I'm not
Hmm.
21 anymore. So the point I'm trying to
Yeah.
make is that you aren't. I went into a dark place there, but you aren't too young. I think there's always something that can be done. Of course, logistics is another thing, but I think sometimes just speaking it and then putting your
Yeah.
intent out there is powerful in itself. And then you'll be
Hmm.
surprised when you listen back to this in like 5 or 10 years and be like, whoa, you know, we did that.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's awesome. But I think that the central thing I'm hearing, which is like you call yourself, of course, near the light, which is like the second part of your name, right? It seems as though
Mm.
there's a deliberate intent to bring light into the world, if I can call it that. One of the ways in which you that pulled you, of course, was that Zim story. But then, correct me if I'm wrong, is content creation and influence is just a vehicle through which, or writing books, a vehicle through which you do that, or am I getting ahead of myself?
Um, the name came from my godmother. I was
Mm,
in Zim actually,
mm,
and we were. She was driving me around. We went to visit my cousin's grave, and we were just hanging out together. And
mm,
she just looked at me, and she was like, "You have a light about you. Like everywhere
mm,
you go, you're so vibrant, and you have this aura." And people always used to say that to me when I was like in my like mid-teens.
mm,
Um, because I, would wear my afro out, and I was just very confident to represent all I
mm,
am. I'd wear bold African prints and
mm.
everything. My rings would have Zimbabwe maps on it. You could look at me and know, okay, she knows who she is.
Right.
So people gravitated towards that. So I just got the name from that. But on social media, I feel like my space before was about hair, but now it's just a young woman like understanding who she is and
Mm,
capturing that for the
mm,
world to see. I like to share my raw moments to some degree while still protecting myself,
mm-hmm.
but also I like to share my achievements to show that it is possible. Like I'm so young and I've achieved so much, and I just want other girls to know and other women, even if they're older than me, to
Mm-hmm.
know that it's never too late and you can do whatever you dream of,
Mm,
just as long as you believe in yourself. And of course there's other factors. I've been very blessed for the
of course.
opportunities I've been able to create,
Right.
but I think even like if a woman wants to go back to school and she's 55 and she feels
Mm-hmm.
like it's too late, like you can do it. Like if you believe in yourself, don't let anyone else's opinion of you're too old or you're not going to have
Mm,
time or
mm,
whatever get in the way. That's what I want my main message to be when I
mm.
really look at everything as a whole.
It's to inspire. To inspire.
Yeah.
Love
Hmm.
that. But before you started, what made you just say, okay, I think there's this thing called Instagram or there's this thing called YouTube. That's where I want to express. Like, how did you get into that?
Um,
You know?
so I was 15, and a lot of my friends were, starting to like hang out with boys and go to all these like functions, and my mum was so strict that my mum was always like,
Zimbabwean mom was not one.
yeah.
There's that thing like that.
My mum would just be like, "How's Green Day Coco?" And I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, like, guys, sorry, I can't come."
Oh my day.
So, in those nights when I was on the weekends when I was home, I would watch. There was a woman called Taryn Guy, and she was like one of the first women. She's from the States as well,
Right.
but she was one of the first women to start the natural hair movement. Like, she had this huge fro, and I just remember watching her videos on repeat, trying to copy her moves. And then I would write blogs. I would studied media before I went to university, so I would make all these websites and run to school on Monday and show my teacher and be like, "Mr. Fennick, look, I made this magazine. What do you think? Like, can you grade it for me?" And I was always just really like into. I would get my friends. I remember we went into H&M, and we went into the changing rooms, because the changing rooms, there was like a disabled one that had so much space. So I had like 6 of my friends with curly hair, and I took all their pictures for this magazine I was making. And the queue for the changing room was so long because others were waiting in other cubicles.
So like, gee,
And I
can you
was just
finish?
there.
Like, can you
I
finish?
was, yeah, and I was taking everyone's pictures. I was just always improvising. I believe that's a Zimbabwean trait,
Yeah,
though. Like,
100%.
we are very
Making a
good.
plan. Making a
A
plan.
100%. If you give us lemons, we will make lemonade, cake,
100%.
lemonade itself, lemonade, ice cream. Like, we would make everything
Yeah.
out of just the lemons. So, I would do all these things, and eventually I just remember being like, I want to make a video for YouTube, and I made it on my iPhone 4S, Windows Movie Maker,
Mad.
and
Mad.
uploaded it.
Mad.
And I remember in school, like, everyone would play it to, make jokes and be like, who does she think she is? But it was just so fun. And from there, I just continued doing it, but then not realizing I was building something. And it wasn't until like a year later, when I had already gotten like 20K followers, and I was like, oh, this can actually be a job. Like, you can actually make money from this. And my first job was £35, and I went to collect it from Western Union.
Were you like,
But by the time,
look at the money?
yeah,
Like,
I
oh
was
my
shocked.
day, this is what? This is money? This is
It
insane.
was, yeah. And I remember collecting it, and by the time Western Union took their fees, it was probably like £25. And I ran into H&M and Claire's, whatever I could find, and I just bought all this stuff, and I was like, wow, like, this is my first paycheck, and it felt amazing. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. But
Wow.
it happened so naturally. It wasn't like intentional. I feel like nowadays it's intentional because people are aware of what social media can do. But when I started, Instagram had just started like a year before. So no one was making money off of it.
But it was just like pure, just desire to express, showcase,
Yeah.
see yourself like, the people that you see on TV or rather on the internet as well. And then of course, then you got a little bit, I think there's something powerful of that first pound or first dollar and being like, oh gosh, like psychologically. It's like, if I can
Yeah.
just repeat this process, like how many more can come out of that?
Not even. I've never been someone that's been
Yeah,
driven by money.
right.
And whenever
What has driven you? What has driven you?
the idea that I can take something that's in my mind and bring it to reality is
Manifestation.
like
Right.
that fulfills me. Like, I literally got goosebumps thinking about it. And a lot of my friends are very successful, so they're driven by money. Like, they want the most lavish car, like the biggest house, and I love all of that. Like, obviously I've bought a house and I live comfortably, but I don't work hard for money. Like, I just work hard, well, because it's a blessing to be able to wake up and this is what I do. Like, I don't take that for granted. So I just enjoy it, and I just know that whatever I put my mind to, I can do because I've done it. So that's how I look at it now.
For people that I feel like, I don't know, the expression manifestation is like in the zeitgeist now. It's like
Yeah.
thrown around a lot. But I think it's simply that it's the idea of bringing something from your head and bring it into the world, right? What advice would you give? Because you've manifested a lot,
It's scary advice because now I'm getting older. I find myself, I'm not doing it as much as I used to, but when I have a dream, I literally go. Like, I don't think about pardon me, I don't think about the risks. Like with
You
my
just
salon,
shoot.
I
Mm.
yeah, like with my salon, one of my friends came over. I used to do hair from home, and I stopped doing it because I went to uni and whatever.
Right.
So this girl was like, "Please, you haven't cut my hair in 3 years. Like, I don't trust anyone else. Can I come over?"
Mm.
So she came to my house. I cut her hair, and she turned to me and she was like, "Why did you stop doing this? Like, you're so good."
Mm.
And that night we looked at shops that were, being for sale, being
Mm-hmm.
rented out,
Mm.
and I saw this really gorgeous shop in North London. And the next morning I called them. I sent an inquiry that evening, but they didn't get back to me. Then I remember going to an event in the morning. I was on my way back home. I picked up my phone to say, let me call them. And as I picked up my phone, they called me.
Wow.
And
Mm.
I was like, hello, who's this? And they were like, it's so and so from Bracewells. And I was like, okay. And then they were like, can you come in today? And I was like, yeah, I'll be there right away. But it was now like 3:30,
Mm-hmm.
and I still had to get home to get my car. Like a driver had taken me
Mm-hmm.
and get to the venue. And that journey, it was like a Friday afternoon. Like kids were, finishing school. There was so
Mm-hmm.
much traffic.
Mm-hmm.
I got there at 5:30 on the dot. And I remember like walking into the shop and I had my phone in my hand and I was like, so when I get this shop, I'm gonna paint it pink and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that. And the guy was like,
So what?
slow down, Mia.
Mm.
He
Mm.
was like, there's 4 other applicants, so you need to send your your proposal. We need to see what you're gonna do with the space, and then we'll get back to you. And I was like, yeah. So I'm gonna have
Mm.
this and I'm
Mm.
gonna have that.
Mm-hmm.
And then then I sent my proposal that evening, and I'd already, weird enough, I had been doing these like workshop with people, so I had this proposal already made, and
Wow.
all I had to do was just put some pictures of a salon, of the decor, and send it off because it had my bio and
Everything.
everything
Mm-hmm.
I've achieved, so it was ready, and I
Mm-hmm.
sent it that evening. And then the next Monday, I got an email saying, "Congratulations, like it's yours." Bearing in mind, I have got no idea how to run a salon.
Right.
I've never like worked in a salon before. Like I don't know anything about it. So I
Yeah.
called my dad, and my dad is like, when I call him, and if he says the sky's red, the sky's red.
This guy's red.
So I was
Red.
like,
Mm.
Dad, what should I do? Like, I've got this shop, but I don't know anything about opening a salon. He said, listen, you'll never know till you try. He was
Mm-hmm.
like, you don't want to be my age and look back and regret not doing it.
Mm.
So I did it. And the craziest thing I did, and I hate to say this out loud because people always look at me like I'm crazy. I started working on the salon, like renovating it, everything, before I even signed the lease. Like I started working on it in July and I signed the lease in October.
Because you could have sunk money and there could have been like a dispute. You're like, nope, we don't want you anymore. And then you'd have
Yeah,
stopped business. But you were
that's
sure.
how
But you were sure. Like, nah,
I
listen.
was sure.
Like, this is
I
it.
was sure.
Right.
But that I have so many stories like that. Like I'm the kind of person that if I say I want to work with, I'm gonna say it because one day I will.
But
But if I'm like one day I
say
want to
it.
work
But
with
let's put it out there.
Beyonce, yeah, because
Yeah.
I love
She
Beyonce.
said what she
Like one,
said. She
she'll
said
be
what.
in my
Right.
emails tomorrow. Like those are the kind of things that happen. So it's just like I believe in, the power of your words, but I also believe in the power of walking in confidence with the actions you take to align the words to
Mm.
your dream.
Mm. Who gave you that?
I know my mum will be listening to this and be like, she gave it to me. So I'm gonna say I've watched my mum like, journey through life as a single woman, and she's been able to achieve so much. And I think seeing her she would be like, she'll do things that we're gonna move, like let's start packing, but she'll be like, oh, I'm gonna buy a house, and she'll be like, let's start packing. We haven't gone to view a house. She hasn't done her mortgage. Like that's literally what she did. And we were living in boxes. And then like the next, month, she was like, okay, we're moving next month. And we had everything packed already. So my mom just, watching her do everything she said she would, I guess that taught me a lot. But I've just always been someone that, looks up to people like all around me, whether they're people that might not be doing as well. Like everyone has a story. I love Humans of New York. Like everyone has
Oh
a
yeah,
story.
for sure.
So you might learn from someone that you wouldn't even think you would, who might tell you what they wish they would have done, what their regrets are. And then you might learn from someone who's like super rich and super successful who's telling you what to do and what not to do. So I learn from everyone. So I think everyone who I've ever had a conversation with, they've always put a little seed in me
Yeah,
and helped me grow and helped me blossom.
that's phenomenal. And in your quest, if I can call it that, to like become and express, who's been the biggest mentors? You mentioned your mother. Have there been any other people that have really helped
Um,
shape you?
this is gonna sound really crazy,
Mm.
but my older self is my biggest mentor.
Ooh,
So
ooh.
when I say that, I always have to elaborate because people don't
Right,
understand.
right.
But I'm someone that, like, I've, done therapy and I've gone on a huge journey of healing. So I understand that we all possess the inner child within us that maybe gets triggered sometimes. And that's why, as adults, we lash out. Sorry,
Mm.
like London, I
Now
can
you're
hear
fine.
London
Yeah,
outside.
yeah, no, you're good.
So
Yeah.
yeah, like
Mm.
my inner child will maybe get triggered by something, and I get upset, and I have to understand what happened
Where's
as a
this
kid.
coming from? Where's this coming
Where's this
from?
coming from?
Mm.
But then when I look at the future Nia, like I just aspire to be like her, and that's who guides me.
Mm.
Like literally, I'll have conversations with my older self, and I imagine this woman who's very free spirited. She's achieved a lot, but she's a minimalist. Like she was always going to these like gardens and having picnics and painting. Like she's very detached from the internet. Like she's had her time,
Mm.
but now she's just very with nature. So she always guides me. I don't really have mentors though. Like
Mm.
I'm very much to myself, like in my own bubble. I don't really have someone I call for like business advice or to guide me to say what
Mm.
next. I very much talk to myself a lot.
That's so powerful. I had firstly on the therapy, well done. I go to therapy every month. I think it's important to say that because we need to normalize therapy
Yeah.
and finding like even it's expensive, there are affordable therapists out there, believe me. It's just a
Hmm.
very useful way to look at yourself from a different vantage point. And it sounds really silly,
Yeah.
but it's a phenomenal tool to understanding what's going on here and how to navigate
Hmm.
through the world.
Hmm.
Second, on the second part, I love the point around. Honestly, it's actually my older self. For me, it's usually like the little child, and then also I don't know if it's a bit morbid. I think of the eulogy a lot, like the eulogy in terms of dearly beloved. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, what are they going to write about you? Or and are you proud about what's going to be written down over the impact and influence that you had? I don't know if that's a bit of a morbid way to think about it.
No, I'm here for it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's just a reminder to like we aren't going to be here forever. So whilst you're here, do what you can,
Hmm.
so that you don't regret anything. But that's wild. So okay, so your mom, you want to meet Beyonce one day, but in terms of who guides you, it's your older self.
Hmm.
Um, what informs what she's doing? Because you said you really have a real visual around your older self. You're like she's in nature. She's the intent's there, but she's not in it like that. She, what guides that? Did you just create that character to be like, okay, cool, that's the character I want to be?
Um, this is gonna sound like, I
Mm.
hope I don't sound crazy, but ultimately my older self is my younger self, but just wiser. Because when I was younger, like I used to love being like in the parks, just I loved painting. Like I was always just doing creative things. Obviously the internet, it was like you would go home to a computer, you wouldn't have it in your pocket. I was just always so free and happy around nature, like
Mm.
just with fresh air.
Mm.
That was always me. So ultimately it's kind of like I'm returning home. Like it's a cycle, like the inner child, then growth to adult,
Mm.
all the unlearning of things I've experienced, the learning of everything I am experiencing,
Mm.
and then taking all of those lessons and just evolving into the person that I aspire to be. And ultimately, I feel like our childhood selves were very happy for the most part because we didn't have an awareness of things that were going on in the world.
Mm.
So, our joy came from being outside, hanging out with friends, like coloring in, playing with toys, like the simple things.
Mm.
So I feel
Mm.
like I want to return to the simple things. I don't want to I don't want my happiness to be defined by complex things or material items or
Mm.
money or financial gain. I want it to be defined by like nature
Yeah.
and just things that are so beautiful but that we take for granted.
I appreciate that. I can resonate to that. Um, with regards to the influence that you have right now, 'cause I feel like I don't know if it's because you've traveled a lot, or it's the therapy, or it's the I feel like you're very wise. You're very wise, and you've learned a lot. And I'm learning a lot
Thank
just being
you.
in this conversation. With all that you've learned and the influence that you have right now at this juncture of your career, what do you want the future to look like?
For the next few years, I want to definitely open more curl bars. Like that's my next goal for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I want to also go into like the personal side of life. Like I watched a movie the other day. It's called The Photograph on
Mm-hmm.
Netflix with Issa Rae. It's really, really good.
Right.
And one of the actresses said, I want to be good at love as much as I'm good at working. And that spoke
Mm-hmm.
volumes to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I'm someone that's so work orientated. Like, I love my career that it's become my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I really want to hone in on that side of life, like creating a family and
Mm-hmm.
putting work on pause for a second to just indulge in love and
Mm-hmm.
experience that. Like I'm 24, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
about to be 25.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, as a woman, naturally you start to think, oh gosh, 30 is around the corner. Like, yeah, like you start to
I'm
think
30, so I'm like, wow, I feel attacked. I feel attacked.
it's close.
I feel
It's not.
attacked.
It's not the next bus stop, but it's a few away. So
Right,
naturally, I just think of not to say the world ends at 30. It doesn't. But for a woman, naturally, you just start to think of those things like family
right,
life and
right.
stuff. So in the next few years, I want to have businesses that work for me, and I want to have an amazing team of women that are just so driven and that love what they do and that just help my businesses to elevate as much as I help them to elevate.
Mm-hmm.
I want to literally see the whole world. Like I want like 2 passports to be full, and I also want to just be happy, like just enjoy life. Those are definitely my top goals for sure.
You have you have no boundaries to what you can and can't do, which is very illuminating. Like you don't there's nothing that's stopping you and what you want to do in terms of how you think.
Sometimes myself,
Okay?
sometimes,
There's it right.
sometimes, yeah.
But some people might be like, "Oh, I want to do this if I can, or maybe or I'll try, or hopefully." You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
No, this is what I want to do, and there doesn't seem to be any barriers between you, your present self and the future self. Who I just
yeah.
and that's you say that's from your mom and your dad, or just your mom who's like, no, you can create whatever, you can paint whatever on whatever canvas that we want. Because that's a powerful gift that you
Yeah.
have, right?
Um, I think it's I don't want to say this in a boastful way, but I think it's mainly me because when I
Mm,
reflect on my childhood, if I'd go to my mum and be like, I remember when I first said I want to be a blogger, fair enough, she didn't know what it was, but she wasn't like, yeah, go for it.
mm,
Like she didn't really give me much excitement because it was a
mm,
new industry.
mm,
And then my dad, like my dad's a very easy, laid back guy. So if I'm like, Dad, I want to open up a sweet shop, he's going to be like, yeah, go for it. But he's not going to be like illuminated and
right.
excited.
That's
He's
cool.
not going to be like
Right. Have a
that.
go. You say have a go.
Yeah.
Mm,
I feel like my parents are both, when they see what I've done, that's when they really indulge in it. But before, they're just like, they don't want to excite me too much, but they don't want to make me feel small. So they just
mm,
stay balanced and
mm,
neutral. And
mm,
then I go over the top and I'm like, I'm doing this and I want to do that and this and that. So I feel like, I don't know, I've always been like that as a kid.
mm, mm. I like that. And with that spirit, to bring it full circle, Zimbabwe, the place we call home, or at least,
Mm.
you're British and Zimbabwean, but you're part Zimbabwean, which means it's part of your home as well. What do you, what does shifting the narrative look like for you in a Zimbabwean sense?
Um, I think the most important thing when I think of Zim is for people to see beyond Mugabe, like
Mm,
beyond the politics. Like I can't stress how many times I've been in an Uber or gallivanting and I'm like, I'm from Zimbabwe and they're like, oh Mugabe and I'm like, no, I said Zimbabwe.
not a one person, a
Yeah,
country,
like that's
a
the
country.
first person they bring up, who
Mm,
obviously is a huge part of, our history, but
right.
there's so much more. Like I really want people to feel safe and open to know that, they can travel there. Like, they shouldn't fear going to Zim. Like, there's so many beautiful places to see, and there's so much culture to indulge in. And I think that's the most important thing that I could think of when you first asked me that.
Right. And I hope it doesn't remain that way, because I look at it still like I was in Vic Falls just before I moved here, December. I went for like a week. It's like a blank canvas. It's literally a blank canvas. I think, man, if this canvas was somewhere else, man, a lot of people, they would do a lot of phenomenal things with this space,
Yeah.
But that's an opportunity. You can be sad, but that's also like a great opportunity to be like, man, a lot can be done. That's at least what's excited me the most. But Nia, thank you so much for your time.
I have to say,
yes.
This is probably my favorite interview I've ever done, because I spoke about things I never speak about, and it was amazing. So thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you, shedding, your light, and not just on the people who listen to this, or myself, but then also the world as well. So keep doing your thing and keep shining.
Thank you, and I hope to see you in Sim for some buvos,
Nenyama, the whole thing.
Yeah, but thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Nia. Cheers. Take care.
Bye.